Hello and welcome to another episode of Climate Watch. I'm your host, Fei Fei. This episode is extra special because we're launching a video alongside the podcast. It's something new we are trying this year, hoping to bring in more life into our conversations. And that's not the only new thing. We're also introducing a fresh conversation format. This time, we're hosting a roundtable discussion in collaboration with Professor Wang Binbin from Peking University. If you remember, last year, she brought us some incredibly thought-provoking discussion in the episode on the need for new climate narratives. But after that conversation, it became quite clear to both of us that one episode isn't enough to make a real impact. So this year, we are continuing our collaboration with Binbin and also her initiative to bring in you fresh voices with people who don't typically appear on platforms discussing climate issues to see what new ideas and perspectives may emerge. Welcome back, Binbin.
So happy to come back. And yes, this time not only me, but also my initiative, Beyond Climate Dialogue. And why I have this initiative, why we should come together. When we talk, it's also I think related the when we last time when we talk is about hope, because nowadays when we talk about climate change, it's most of the time we would think, oh yes, it's an extreme weather disaster, and then what we should do is just turn off the light and lower the air conditioner and save water. Anything more? Simply not. So although so many people, they may want to join us, but they don't know how. And all the narrative is so negative and passive. So this is why I think only stay in the silo of climate is not enough. If we want to really, find some creative solutions, we need to step out from our own silo, from the climate, is our comfort zone, and then talk with people from different fields. And we can inspire each other and create some new pathway towards the future. So this is why I initiate this dialogue.
Yes, as we discussed before, that climate is so intertwined in every part of our life. Yes. But seldomly we look at a lot of issues without the lens of climate change. So I think it's also very significant for us, and it's also very meaningful for us to invite more people into this dialogue. So also with your initiative Beyond Climate Dialogue, and also on our platform Climate Watch this time. And so for our launch episode for this grand and meaningful and fun collaboration, I hope, we're starting with a very crucial topic.
Yes.
On a very special day, we are looking at climate change from the perspective of females. And also we are launching this episode on the International Women's Day. So I think, what is the better way to kick off this collaboration with an all-female roundtable?
Yeah.
So joining us today for our launch episode is Yao Songqiao. Songqiao is involved in a lot of activities related to environment, and I think she's an entrepreneur, and also she founded Wildbound, which she'll explain later with us. She's also worked extensively as a researcher on environmental issues worldwide. I think her work has taken her from China's rivers to agricultural projects in Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, and other African countries. And so, welcome, Songqiao. Thank you for joining us on Climate Watch and also Beyond Climate Dialogue.
Thank you so much, Fei Fei, and thank you, Binbin. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, you founded Wildbound. So, can you explain to us about that initiative?
Sure. I started Wildbound in 2017 after spending almost 4 months in Antarctica and witnessing how just being immersed in nature can change people completely. So I thought young people in China don't have experiences like this very often. So my initial thinking is, how do we have these experiences where people are completely open and connected to nature, and through that become agents of change. But since 2017, it's been an 8-year journey, so we have done many different things. We started with those expeditions, learning journeys, but we've also worked with different systems to transform the leaders and the organizations within them. So we worked with schools, we work with companies, we work with climate leaders, with climate organizations, and also philanthropists and resource holders. So we're hoping that by connecting with different people in the ecosystem, we're moving towards transformation, that everybody cares about nature, everybody can be living in harmony, and from their own point of influence starting to make action.
That sounds like a fun expedition. Can you explain further a little bit more detail to us? So what sort of activity normally will be carried out under Wildbound?
Yeah, so actually we're planning something in May in Bali, and we're hosting a regenerative design workshop, so which is a training and experience for architects and designers in Asia, all around Asia. So we'll have a 5-day immersive experience together. They will be exposed to principles and theory of regenerative design, which is a very different way of looking at building design, which is not just changing materials or zero carbon, but actually looking at the essence and potential of a place and a space. Like, for example, a space we're in, how do we elevate and optimize the potential of this place, and how do the different actors collaborate and co-evolve in that process, so that an architect or a facilitator become an enabler of the different living systems within it. So don't know if that's still a little bit abstract, but basically it's changing a mindset that you're working with the ecosystem around you, but all of the ecosystem together moves towards regeneration. A lot of our economy currently moves towards destruction or exploitation, where turning resources into goods for selling them for values. But how do we actually make them in a regenerative, sustainable way that not only are we taking, but we're also adding value. But in that process, there's all these side effects and product that's actually benefiting the whole system. So that's what we do.
Yeah, I remember last time when I was talking with Binbin, she also mentioned a very similar idea of the reason that we are facing climate change and global warming is not just about, say, the economy or the economic development. It's about the whole system. Something is wrong with the whole system. And so to better address this issue, we need a change systematically. And I think that's very similar. And is that the reason that you sort of resonate with each other?
Yes, I think this year is our 10-year anniversary to know each other.
Oh, yes. Wow, round of applause.
And Songqiao highlight ecosystem, and this is why I recommend Songqiao to join us this time, to celebrate this special day. And also, Songqiao is the only Chinese female of Roma Club of Roma.
Member of Club of Rome.
Yeah, yeah. So it's this club. When people focus on the economic development, and Club of Roma, they released a report, the limit of growth, and just warn the people, hey, we should stop, we should rethink. So it's a very important international think tank. And I'm so proud that Songqiao can be, chosen to join that club, and especially the only one Chinese female now. Yeah, and I think it's not only because Songqiao has a strong academic background, but also she's very active, as she mentioned just now, Wildbound. And 10 years ago, in her 20, I think, I met her in Paris. Yeah. And that's a milestone for climate, process, because in 2015, we got the Paris Agreement, and right before Paris Agreement, we gathered in it's a youth leadership summit, right? Yeah, in San Francisco. Yeah, so both of us were the keynote speakers, and I think I
You spoke first.
First, yeah. Right? And you second. So I just sit here and listen to her, and she introduced why she has strong interest to Antarctica, on climate and biodiversity, and her trip to, the Zimbabwe, different country of Africa. I said, wow, so interesting, so colorful, and especially she's also from Shandong province, the same hometown. Yeah. So from then on, I felt, oh yes, I'm so happy, so proud. I have this sister, from the same place with the same root, and also with the same hope and the same mission and vision. Yeah. So did you still remember what you talk about your childhood? I still remember the card you mentioned from Antarctica, right?
Yeah, that was when I was actually fundraising for my first trip to Antarctica, and I went to Antarctica right after the Paris summit. So I think it was relatively a hopeful period during the climate movement. I remember I actually mentioned systems change in that conversation because it was with global young people, global youth, and talking about, I think sharing our life stories and hopefully to inspire them. And I think I just shared that I had a connection with nature since I was a child. And when I was 9 years old, my mom's colleague, Uncle Li, I call him Li Shushu, gave me a set of photos of Antarctica, and I became fascinated with the land. And I actually, wrote essays and everything as a kid. But when I was 25 and actually going to Antarctica, my mom digged out all of these information of mine. I had no idea that I wrote about the sea ice, I wrote about elephant seal and blue whale and penguins, that those things I thought I learned in graduate school when I actually studied geography later. But actually, as children, we already have this innate connection. And I think very often we need to remember back then our connection. And I think actually at that, in my speech then, I mentioned theory U. I actually mentioned about this blind spot of leadership. A lot of the times we look at an initiative to a system and we think it's not working or it does work, but the actual reason sometimes is not because of the tool, the technique that you're using, but there is a blind spot, which is the inner space of leaders, an inner landscape of leaders. So I actually remember talking about that in that conversation we had in Paris. And I remember when I discovered it myself, it was like a big aha moment because I was still quite young and I had done different things, and some of them were successful, some of them were not, but really reflecting from which point of view, from which inner space are we actually trying to make change. And I think the Paris Agreement was a very pivotal moment because it was when all the countries come together from a place of hope, from a place of connection and shared openness. Right. And now in today's world, it's a little bit harder. I think people's inner space is a little bit more anxious or maybe have a little bit more fear. But I was trying to say that as young people, we all had that inner space of openness and connection with nature. And perhaps we can tap into our wisdom when we were younger.
So you think leadership is kind of playing a key role in, for example, if we want to launch actions, not only in climate, in addressing climate change, but probably in facing with other problems in our life and society. Why do you think leadership is so important?
It's hard for me to say leadership is important because there's so many interpretations of leadership, and the project that Binbin and I both were on, Homeward Bound, the whole focus is talking about women's leadership, especially in science, in technology, and in sustainability and in environmental issues. And I struggled quite a bit with it because I did a lot of education in the West, and for that program, Homeward Bound also talks a lot about becoming a leader. And I think leaders sometimes mean there's also followers, right? And then there's, what does leadership mean? And even in some of the Chinese classic, like in Dao De Jing, for example, the leaders is people who are invisible. Usually when you have accomplished something, but actually people don't know and they already have a good life and they say, oh, it's just such a good things are going so well. And that's when you know you're a good leader. That's what Lao Tzu wrote back in the day. But actually in today's world, it seems like leadership is like strong leader, having a clear agenda, very good speaker, very charismatic, persuasive. But again, those are mostly the outer appearances of a leader, but what is the inner space of the leader? So actually, all of us can be our leaders of our own lives and of our own inner landscape, like what Binbin mentioned, hope. How many of us are leaders of our own emotions of hope? Like how many of us can determine that we're hopeful and decide that, and from the things and the people we interact with, to really have deep hope for the future and for our loved ones, for our future, for our children. It's been very, very difficult. And in that aspect, I think leadership is very, very important. But in some of the outer experiences, I think sometimes we're attached to these things. Not that they're not important, they are, because like in Homeward Bound, we learned that there's not, I think 25 to less than 50%. I think when I was joining, it was only 25% of women are in key leadership positions in science. So then you have most women not even participating in deciding what research are we doing for all of humanity. And that's missing a big piece, right? So these people, the leaders, still have a lot of decision and power in decision making, in what funding, what research, what topics are really important. And women may not be part of that conversation. Young people may not be part of that conversation. And that conversation may be very largely West dominated, I don't know, or certain industry dominated. So I think still participating equitably, but I also wanted to recognize this deeper dimension of leadership.
Yeah, that sort of answers a long-lasting question of me when we're talking about women in leadership, is that of course we need a good presentation of females in the leadership roles, but I often have this question of what if I don't want to be a leader? Because as Songqiao pointed out, a lot of times people assume leader to be aggressive, to be strong, to be in charge, but that necessarily doesn't represent everyone in the society. And that sort of answers back that we are also the leader of our own life. We sort of dictate and determine whether we want to choose hope or fear, whether we want to choose this path or another path. And I think I read it in your book, the book that Binbin gave me last time, 我们选择的自己. I think it loosely can be translated into our choice. And that specifically talking about your trips to the Antarctica, homebound, as Songqiao mentioned. And I understand that's also the trip that you two got more connection with not only with each other, but with other females in the STEM world. So what kind of experience is that? I've never been to the Antarctica, and I've never been on a long distance ship trip journey down there. So can you bring us up some of the beautiful details around the South Pole?
Yeah, sure. But before that, I want to echo Songqiao. Why I participate in this Homeward Bound project is also because of Songqiao, and because she mentioned Antarctica several times during her speech in Paris. So then I felt, oh yes, I fell in love with Songqiao. I thought, oh wow, such a brilliant girl. So I follow her WeChat. And she mentioned she wants to raise money for her trip to Antarctica, and she participated the Homeward Bound 3 years ahead of me, right? And she's the first faculty member of Homeward Bound, and also the only one from China. And then I think, yes, I also need to I want also go, join this project. And I suggest Songqiao yourself, you share the story, how you organize and make this trip, happen. And but for me, this project really changed my life. And I think it's also the interesting point is also about climate and gender, because Fabian, the founder of this project, one day she had a dream, oh yeah, she was in Antarctica with a lot of women and a flag behind them. And so when she wake up, she told her husband, I had this kind of dream. So her husband said, why not you make it true? And yes, why not? So she just try, talk with a lot of people, raise money, and then make the plan and find the co-founders, and then make it happen. So when I heard this kind of story, I feel, wow, it's a kind of female leadership. Yeah, from 0 to 1. And just because a very beautiful dream. And then when I was there, it's every year they choose 100 female leaders, if we can use this way. But at that moment, I don't like leaders. As you mentioned, I don't want to be leader. I learned a lot about leadership, and the leadership is different from leader, and the leader is how to manage other people. Traditionally, we understand in this way, but leadership is how to manage yourself, how to manage your life, and how to enjoy your life, in a way you feel comfortable and very enjoyable. So and also before this trip, what I learned, I never feel any gender problem in my life. Because in China, when we were very young, we were educated that women and men, we are equal, we are same, right? So when at the very beginning, I was a journalist like you, and then I move on. I think in my career, I didn't meet any problems. At that moment, I didn't met any problem about related to gender equity. It's in Antarctica. That program, so many people, 100 female leaders, scientists from around 30 countries. We shared our personal stories, and their sharing really shocked me, and they helped me to rethink my life. And I realized, oh, it's just because I didn't open my eyes. I didn't have this perspective. I thought it's Europe, but it's not. It's a kind of injustice. And I used to play a role as women. We can say, oh yes, you stay and take care of the family, and at the same time you have to work hard. You have to work as hard as the other men. So I in this way. But then on that ship, sharing with other other colleagues, I realized, oh, it's unfair, right? And it means that we have double mission on our shoulders. But why is so Euro for women but not for men? So I think this trip gave me this kind of enlightening, and helped me to reflect, what happened and how to help more girls to wake up about this kind of situation, and how I think it's not about do you want to trigger a battle between men and women? No, because for men, they also have this kind of unfair situation. You should take care of the family in a different way, earn more money, and you should get higher, ranker, and to be a senior, official. So I think they also have this kind of social responsibility. So when we look back from this perspective, and it's not only about gender, it's also a ecosystem, and it's a systematic problem. And only both men and women, we wake up and we try to rebuild the system, which can benefit all of us, then we can have a better life. Yeah,
exactly. I think when we're talking about gender equality, it's not that the females are trying to blame on the males for a lot of problems, but I think some males are also can be called the victims of the system as well. So basically, we're calling for a change systematically. But I'm wondering for Songqiao, is that trip to Antarctica also open up your eyes to the gender issue as well? Or why? I think I actually checked out some of your speeches and also your podcasts before this show, and I realized Antarctica is such a landmark trip, I think, for you. And so why is Antarctica so important to you?
Yeah, as I mentioned, when I was young, I just had this fascination. I think just from those photos and seeing ice and penguins and whales, and And to be honest, every little child I speak to, like, when I meet children, they all know so much about Antarctica. I think people naturally connect with penguins or glaciers.
Like what we are showing in the back.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, when you pass the Drake Passage, there is a part called the Antarctic Convergence where the cold currents and the warm currents meet, and you have a sudden drop in temperature. That's where you could meet an iceberg like this. You really feel like you're going into a different world, because this is a very large continent. It's twice the size of Australia, and in the winter, the sea around it completely freeze over, so it's even another 1.5 size of the continent. So it's a huge landmass, but it's never been colonized by human being. We were never able to settle and actually to conquer Antarctica, to make it another country or make it anything. So nature is the most powerful thing. So nature is the matriarch there, is the leader. And everything we see, if it's a glacier, if it's an iceberg, if it's whales and penguins, they have their own way of living. They have their own Tao, their own wisdom of life in Antarctica. So I do feel like when I'm there, there's just this connection to this deeper and to this much wider perspective than just a human perspective. So I think there is one side that is perhaps, if I'm linking it to gender, I've never actually made the two explicitly together. Maybe it is opening up to Mother Nature's voice. And usually when we're in a big city, or when we're, at a big conference where there's a lot of people, then it's mostly human voice. It's not actually Mother Nature's voice. Although Mother Nature is speaking to us all the time through the air we breathe, through the water we speak, through all the trees around us, through the oxygen that we're taking in. But actually Antarctica is very close with it. And I think people have similar experiences in the rainforest or even in the desert, or even looking at the night sky. But I think in Antarctica, there's just this overwhelming sense of something that's much larger than just a human existence. And on that trip of Homeward Bound, because it was all women together, and because women are given this space to reflect and to connect, I think that's when all of these stories of different people, of different women, whether you're from China or Australia or Zimbabwe, you find out that people share very similar life story. You shared very similar path and perspective, and the tools and the quality that helped you are also very similar, and the courage that you've had, the perseverance and the patience. So then you realize that, for me, at least personally, Antarctica is a place where people really connect, because this is not your home country or my home country. It's actually where we all realize that we're all indigenous to Mother Earth. We're not just a Chinese or Australian, and that's how we're managing Antarctica right now. It is a global commons. It belongs to all of humanity and future generations. No country can lay territorial claim, although some countries are, but there's all suspended in international law, and no country can mine Antarctica's resources.
Yes, and can help us to rethink the what other, and also about the human order, because we used to think humans on the top of the pyramid. But in Antarctica, I still remember I visited an island full of penguins. And before we visit that island, we were told, hey, keep quiet and do keep 5 miles distance, with the penguin, and do not disturb your life. So we just very careful and close our mouths. But when we arrived and walk on the island, we found the penguins just look at us. Oh, maybe you are another penguin, so they just pass by.
A larger penguin has entered.
Yeah, and I think if at that moment, I thought if I were in a zoo, I look at a penguin, I will full of curious, and so funny and so different kind of interesting point. But for penguin there, when they look back at me as a human, they have no this kind of, they just put you there, they just go do their usual things, swim, and they just try to find food. So I really think, oh yes, it's their land, it's not humans, and they on behalf of the Mother Nature, and it's we used to think, yes, we can control, we can manage the disaster, we can control everything, and we can create new technology, different kind of engineering, very advanced engineering approach to address different kind of crisis. But in Antarctica, I realized the potential of nature is so big, it's huge. And what humans should do is should look back at our nature mother, this earth, and learn from them. And not only, I'm not saying that, develop the technology, advanced technology is wrong, but at the same time, we should have different kind of choice. And we should also learn from nature mother. And I really think a lot of wisdom nature mother have. But because we used to look ahead, so this is the point. If we look back and rebuild the ecosystem, we really can not only help the nature mother, but more importantly to save ourselves. I still remember in 2009 Copenhagen, the big slogan is, it's the last chance for human to save the planet. But now we realize it's not the time for us to save the planet. It's the time for human to save ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think I read somewhere online about a debate on perpetual growth, that some would argue that, for example, especially in economy, we are only seeking growth. But people would ask, where is the end for this growth? You can't grow forever. There is a limit here. There must be a limit somewhere, but where is it? But then from the last time that we talked about the use of coal, Binbin said something very, I think, awakening to me, is that we're thinking coal is the culprit of global warming right now. But coal is also part of nature. Coal was there because of nature, and now we're talking about renewable energies. Of course, they seem good now, but what would happen, for example, 100 years later, when we're also using renewable energy on a large scale? What will happen next? Would renewable energy become the next coal that we shift our blames on? So maybe the problem is how we use it, is our systems. And so I think probably a trip to the nature, as Songqiao mentioned, when you start to calm down, when you start to quiet down, you can reflect and think, my position as a human or as a female in this world, in the nature, not only in the human society, but also on this globe. Because I remember, because I've never been to Antarctica before, but the closest experience I have is to a small island down south of Australia. It's called Phillip Island, where you can see the little penguins coming back to their home on this island from a trip to the Antarctica. And when those penguins start to getting onto the shore, the lights, because it's almost in the dark time, and so the staff members will turn off the light, so the humans are staying in the dark, and there's twinkling of light on the pathways for the little penguin to see their path to their home. And that's the moment I was like, we are like the outsider here. We are, if it's in the zoo, we are the animal in the zoo, and the penguins are the humans in the zoo. And that sort of is the first moment for me to start to reflect my position in the nature, of course. And I think that brings us also to the question of when we are having conversations cross borders, across generations, across sectors, across industries, and also across genders. What do you think? I think Songqiao and also Binbin are also trying to do a very similar thing here, is trying to bringing people together, networking, connecting, regardless of their backgrounds and their education and their working experiences. And so why do you think, having such networking is very important? at this day and age?
Yeah, so initially, when I just started Wildbound, I only want to work with young people because I felt like I met all these people who have resources and wealth in Antarctica, but they're already in their 60s, 70s, and some of them run large corporations that's very polluting. And I felt like, wow, you've only had this experience when you're quite late in your life, and it's too late. So I only wanted to work with young people. I wanted to change them as young as possible. But then I realized that young people are in the system that older people have created for them. So us only working with young people does not solve the problem, because the students would come to us and say, when we're back in our school, when we're back home, other people don't care. And it's so hard for us to try to make a difference. And I knew that because I started as a youth activist. So then we started working with, teachers. And then when we work with schools, the schools say, but it's only the school. It's hard for us to find good examples of businesses. And how do the students find jobs that actually is in the sustainable economy? And then, then we started working with companies and, and now we're starting working with architects because we need space and design. And we started, Binbin's worked with government and international government. We also work with academics. We work with very locally based community holders, indigenous leaders. So I feel like actually everybody has a part to play in this whole system, in the family of all things, in the family of all beings together, because each one of us is part of that greater whole, and we cannot take ourselves out. And actually, whether we do it or not, we are so closely linked to everything around us, right? And there's no way you can say I have no business with a fossil fuel company or with something that's happening in another country. Like, you cannot say in today's world that I'm not connected. So, but our social media and some of our usual ways of thinking put us in boxes and put us in the space that we only talk to people who have similar opinion, who have very similar background. And then that creates more problem because we just perpetuate the same kind of thinking and mindset. And coming back again onto leadership, if people in power are all only having the same mindset, for example, exploiting nature, creating wealth, making people live better, large cars, large houses, but actually inside they feel like they're making progress, but we also have such a big mental health pandemic right now that people are suffering from loneliness, from disconnection, from depression and anxiety and stress. And because we're perpetuating this cycle, if you're in nature in a different experience, then you realize that's not the only way of approaching the world. So I think by having these mindsets and worldviews clash almost and connect, and then realizing the connected shared humanity and then this shared basis that we all have, I think it's what we're trying to do. And I think it's also just very necessary. And I think we want that. Human beings want curiosity. We want wonder. We want new experiences. We want to understand. But sometimes we're put in situations where we might feel defensive or we might feel safe only in our own little bubble. So having those experiences in nature or in another safe space would help for you to build connection with people who are very different from you. And maybe for Binbin, it's actually really solving the challenge of climate change if you look at these different perspectives.
Yes. And also because now we talk about carbon neutrality, and China also announces a carbon neutral goal before 2060. So how to reach the goal, and only emission and the carbon thing is not enough. So to reach the goal, we need the whole system. It's a systematic change, and it's also given me a perspective to think how to push the interdisciplinary campaign at different level. And I can give you a story, a case. I once initiate a global youth leadership training program, and I invited the professors, researchers with different background, different field, to talk about carbon neutrality, talk about the net zero future. So one master student from Cambridge, a girl, she told me this training program changed her career because the senior fellows graduated from the law school of Cambridge. They all, like most of them, participate the big office law and protect the rich people's benefit, and they earn a lot of money. But she said, I cannot find smiles on their face, so I don't want to follow their pathway. But similarly, that's the only beautiful pathway from the outside. They think this is the best pathway for us, the student of the School of Law. So she was worried what kind of pathway she can choose, although at that moment seemingly no choice. But she said after the training program, she realized in the pathway to reach the net zero future, there will be a lot of people. For example, they may work for the coal mine and then they lose their job, but no lawyer now protect their right. And then she checked the international law, and she found there are no chapter in international law protect this kind of vulnerable people. So she said, oh, I think I can contribute to this field. I can push the international law to open a new chapter to protect the new vulnerable group and who may lose their job because of this kind of green transition. And also, I want to be the first lawyer in this field. So at that moment, it's not I empower. So she said, "Oh, Professor Wang, I thank you so much. You really empower me." I say, "No, I should thank you because you empower me. You make me feel my job is so meaningful, and this kind of interdisciplinary training approach is so important." As Songqiao mentioned, for young people to set up the network and open their mind and step up from their own silo and use their, and a lot of students, when they come to me, they also double check with me, hey, Professor, well, I have no background of climate. Can I join you? I thought, of course, you have a new perspective, you can contribute to our mission. And I will give them the case of Christiana Figueres, the former executive secretary, right? Of UNFCCC. She helped, after the Copenhagen conference, I think all the leaders, around the world, they feel a bit frustrated. So they don't want to continue the negotiation, and they just went back home and don't want to come back to the table. So Christiana Figueres visited the countries, and together with other great people like Minister Xie Zhenhua from China, Tubiana from France, those kind of great people, they work together, and finally the national leader came back to the table, and we have the Paris Agreement. But the key point is Christiana Figueres' education background is not climate change.
What is her background?
It's anthropology.
Anthropology?
Yeah, so she said it's the perspective as anthropology give her a perspective to understand human. And also because she can understand the human, the character, the nature of human, she know how to show her respect to the leaders of different countries and how to, share an open atmosphere to talk, to exchange, and invite the people back. So you can see a new perspective really can change the old chessboard.
And then another question I have is for my plan for this year on Climate Watch is really to bring in more people, especially those not involved typically in climate change and climate policies. What should we keep in mind when we are talking people or bringing in people that from different backgrounds and bringing people interdisciplinary or even across generations? Are there anything that we should be prepared before opening up these dialogues?
This is why we should cooperate. This is why we have this kind of cooperation, right? Yeah, we can, as I mentioned, because you are so professional, to moderate this kind of program. So on this kind of topic, you have a new perspective on behalf of the audience, right? And I'm the expert on climate, on carbon neutrality, but too familiar with the topic. And if we have a guest speaker like Songqiao, she has her own perspective, like on the nature, education, ecosystem. So we can exchange and we can learn from each other. But sometimes as the audience, they may have no background of the two topics, and you are so important here, to raise the questions and follow up the questions, to ask for how, why. This is why I think our cooperation, the two programs come together, is so important. And I hope we can contribute a new face to Climate Watch.
And also to the Beyond Climate Dialogue, and also to the climate world, basically.
Yeah, I think you're creating a new space, or like an energy field, where people of different backgrounds can come and share. And it's very important to have that kind of open space. And in a way, we have the audience join us here as well, because it's not just expert or just climate policy. People feel that they have the permission to participate. So I think that's very important. And when you two are opening yourselves up, and when you're connecting to people's essence and their stories that's so meaningful and core to them, I think that will touch people, because that will naturally connect with other people. So I think it is about making space, and I think you're quite good at it.
Thank you. I will try to be more candid, honest, and just ask questions, and do not thinking, maybe this question is not appropriate or not good enough. But I think for a lot of them, especially who do not have a strong connection to, for example, climate or nature, some of them would think this topic is kind of distant, because especially for those living in cities, they're so far away from the nature, especially. And also when we're talking about, the climate is changing, we are having this, we're having that, and we need to do this and we need to do that. But for the majority of the public, they would be like, yes, it's important, but I'm so small that my action probably won't have that of a significance to this whole mission, to this ambitious mission. So, well, sometimes I will have turn it off, because taking the sustainable way of life can be troublesome, can be more expensive, can take in some extra efforts. And so people have this on and off attitudes towards it, is that they want to care it when they care about it, but they can also be quite nonchalant about every aspect of their non-eco-friendly way of life. By having dialogues like this, we can make people realize that your action first needs to be consistent, and also it doesn't matter big or small, really. But basically any spark is meaningful in this world.
Yeah, we have a saying at Wildbound, because we work so much with young people: if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. If you really cannot find joy and fun and make friends while doing it, then maybe don't do it, because you probably, especially for young people, they find more friends playing video games or doing things, and that's why those things naturally attract people. So I think, yes, climate nature might seem quite distant, but you can see, for example, we collaborate with the Nanjing Hongshan, the Red Mountain Zoo, and they have millions, hundreds of millions of followers, young people just looking at the animals, doing something, during COVID. There are so many people who innately care about nature, and they find a certain joy in discovering it. So I think it's very easy to think, oh, I'm not doing this enough, or I'm not doing that enough, this is another burden I have to carry. And that is really too hard, I think, for people these days. So I think find ways to find joy in it is really crucial.
Yeah, fun is very important, and this is why I mentioned the current narrative of climate and nature is too a bit boring. And when we talk about climate nature, oh, I have a lot of task on my shoulder, on my personal life already. I don't want to touch this kind of big issues. And you as expert, you go ahead. I just stay at home. So if we make the topic fun and make people feel, yes, it's interesting and I want to join it, and if it can, I can really enjoy it. So this is why I set up the C-Force lab in Peking University in my institute, because C-Force lab is also trying to help people, because now there are so many depression, among the whole world. And the C is curiosity, courage, and compassion. And so first step is we use different kind of like a climate coach or different kind of approach to help the people to go back to themselves and see themselves. And then we go outside a bit to see, yes, the link between yourself and the climate. And we will not teach the people, tell the knowledge how, but like invite them to join us to make the experiments together to create the new approach. So they can join us with the small things, as you mentioned. And I still remember some international organization when we talk about how to reach the future, and they said there are three R principle, like recycle, reuse, and
reduce. The first one is reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yes. Yeah. So like this one, when we talk about this one too, these three principles with the business, and ask them, hey, follow us. You should match the principles. Otherwise, like, you are a bad guy. And the business was, okay, I have to match the principle. Otherwise, maybe I will get some punishment. But for the general public, if we share, hey, this is the three principle, they said, can I really buy it? Is it cheap enough? So the feedback I gave back to the international organization is that, hey, I can share 3C principle. 3C is, if you really want to reach the consumer, the general public, you should think the principle is cheap, comfortable, convenient. Otherwise, who will care, right?
Yeah.
So this is, I think, the perspective you mentioned, Feifei. We should really work on nature and climate, but first of all, we should understand our audience. We should understand the perspective of general public and really open a pathway for them and reach out, invite them to join us. Otherwise, only a few of us, how can we reach the goal, right?
See, that's why it's important to have female voices in climate conversations, because for years, I think most people are hearing about, the clock is ticking. We need to action now. Otherwise, we are doomed as humanity. This is the last chance for humanity. But, it's been last chance for 20 years now. When is this last chance going to end? So I think now we have this fresh perspective, especially in this space, in this room, that we are bringing in, I think, female voices into this conversation, into the issue.
Yeah, I think Feifei, you mentioned a really interesting point. It's the clock is ticking, it's 20 years. But for many society, they have already ended. For example, matriarchal society. A different way of living and organizing. My family name Yao has a female in it, so it came from matriarchal times. When I lose hope, I look at my family name and think, this family name has survived 5,000 years. And back then, the society were ruled by women. And, we still have matriarchal society out there in the world. And in a way, women have a very different role. And that kind of leadership may not be the same as modern leadership we have. Although women are in charge of not only resources, but relationships. And I think women are very good at managing the relationships and the connections. And you would also find that the way of organizing is very different. So around the world, a lot of civilizations and a lot of different kind of culture have not lasted, and what we're saying, the clock is ticking, what is ending? It's not humanity, or it's not the whole planet is ending. It's a certain way of living has to end, because it's not sustainable, because it's based on the extraction model, because it's based on this hope for growth that is always going to continue. That is not how nature works. So having women to bring in a particular way of working with cycles, working with rhythm, working with other people, building connection, building network and community is crucial, because we need this slow transition or maybe fast transformation of our current system to a climate friendly, to a nature friendly system. And we're all in that great transition together. So it's not that we have to save everything. It's actually how do we move gracefully into another state. And women are really good at this, because I don't know about you, Feifei. I know Binbin has given birth to 2 children. So you go through a lot of transformation yourself to bring a new life to this world. So I think female leaders in this way are also helping us to birth a new system. And we need to change, right? And the old system, there's a lot of things that needs to shift. And there's lots of people who are resisting, who don't want to change. And there's lots of people who are saying, you have to change right now. But how do we actually move that so it has minimal negative impact, so that that shift can be benefiting for human beings and for other beings as well. Yeah.
And also, I think there are a lot of studies saying that females, especially in developing world, are the ones that's been most affected by, for example, extreme weather events brought by climate change, because they are the most vulnerable. Not only developing countries are vulnerable, but this particular group of females in those developing societies are the most vulnerable. And I think not only women are on the front line facing and fighting against these extreme weather events or other negative impacts brought by the changing climate in their own ways. And I think, yes, of course, for those of us who have the fortune to be fortunate enough to not be on that front line, are figuring out our ways to sort of making that transformation as smoothly and also painless as possible for the general public to reach out to that transformation or the future civilization or more sustainable civilization that we hope to achieve in the end, really. And that's basically the gender perspective to the topic of climate change. And I think lastly, as a closing note, what sort of messages do you two have for our audience when it comes to the issue of climate or the issue of finding yourselves in the nature or in our world today? In probably 1 or 2 sentences.
I think when we address this kind of crisis outside, the attitude is count me in. If you use this kind of attitude, you will find, I have my own expertise, I have my own perspective to contribute. Otherwise, the outcome is only blaming each other and show fingers to each other. So remember this principle, count me in, and you will find your own way to join the mission.
What about you, Songqiao?
Yeah, I would say for people who feel like you don't feel connected to nature or climate, maybe first start with your own nature and your own climate. We all have an inner weather each day. It might be actually raining outside, but very sunny inside. So just from that space of opening up and to recognizing yourself and finding joy and openness in it, and you can just pay attention to the trees, the plants around you. You don't have to go to Antarctica right away. You can just start by taking care of your plants at home or paying attention to where your food comes from. Just start very, very small and find joy in it, and then you will find small things naturally will grow and connect you to others.
I do look forward one day, probably I can go to Antarctica myself and really see the penguins, the seals, the icebergs, and also the ocean, the blue sky. Probably I'm not sure. Is the sky blue over the Antarctica?
When it's sunny, yeah. When it's cloudy, it can be gray.
Songqiao and myself, we are together with other three girls. We are initiating a new I think you introduce it better.
Yeah, we have a new project, an expedition to Antarctica, but not as an expedition, but as an ecological pilgrimage, because we think the glaciers, the land, the ocean in Antarctica are actually our elders. And just as people go on a spiritual pilgrimage, for a Buddhist mountain or go somewhere, for ecologists, we go on an ecological pilgrimage to where the record holder of our 30 million years of Earth climate history, long before human beings have come here. So the project is called Gaia's Ark, because we're all gathering for Gaia, which is Mother Earth, and we're hoping to bring people from different culture, different generation, different background, and different wisdom tradition to gather for this journey of inner discovery and also connection and system transformation to Antarctica.
So we can go there together.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I look forward to that. Count me in.
Yeah.
I do want to thank Wang Binbin and also Yao Songqiao for joining us for this very insightful and fun and inspiring conversation. And also, I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Climate Watch. And of course, if you enjoyed today's discussion, you can also follow us on your favorite podcast platform and also check out our latest podcast and video content. We'll also be bringing you more roundtable dialogues in collaboration with Professor Wang Binbin and her Climate Beyond dialogue. So also stay tuned for that. Also, I'm writing a newsletter, Rivers and Mountains. You can keep in touch with me on that platform, Substack too. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
This is CGTN Radio. Hear the difference.